Hello and welcome back to the HH Gaming podcast brought to you by Hellhades.com. As ever, I'm joined by co-host of the show, Paul or Saphira. And we've kind of been away for like 2 weeks or so because we've been exceptionally busy with the stuff that we've been doing with HH Gaming. And as everybody knows, there's not been a lot going on in Raid. However, that is all about to change, because if you thought that you were getting a holiday from events and things going on in the game, clearly Plarium didn't think the same, because they have just dropped a load of news.
It's like, take a break, have a week off, have a couple, enjoy your time off. However, when you come back, everything that we had planned in 1 week, and you're like, yay.
So, wow. I mean, just to go through some of the things that we've heard today, and we've been allowed to announce today. So a lot of this was under NDA. However, by the time that the podcast goes out, the NDA has been lifted, so we're allowed to talk about it now. And you guys we won't get in trouble. So you guys in the community will learn about it around the same time that we do. So where to start? So we've got. So
should we like start with the champion changes? Because I think that's like the first thing that came out, wasn't it? In terms, and that stuff is already out anyway in the world. So I think that the big one, obviously, that everyone will have looked at, and to be honest, he's had a bit of a reputation for being a bad champion. Is obviously Yakal, Void legendary. We always put a premium on Void champions. Now, the interesting update as of today, which will be going out probably already to people by now, I would imagine, or in the next hour or so, but obviously we're 1 day ahead. Listeners, viewers, you're 1 day behind. Time warp. He's going to be available in the clan shop. He is
Yakal's for everyone.
He is the next Yannicka fragment. It'll probably take us another 20 weeks or 24 weeks, which is totally fine. Because obviously it gives you a reason to spend your clan gold other than revenge, accessories, or energy. So everyone's going to get him, and the rework is pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's not just you don't just get Yakal, you get Yakal on steroids.
Yeah, you get new Yakal. So yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. Like, the biggest problem that Yakal had to start with was he was far too dependent on needing a freeze champion to get everything going. Like, the AoE needed to have a freeze out there. He hit hard, not like Trunda level, but he hit pretty strong. But the setup and everything else, and obviously when you have freeze, is a bit of a negative for damage because you lose it. So all of it just felt a little bit like this is awkward. His passive required quantity of freezes rather than an individual freeze. So, I mean, what they've done is great. They've kind of made him a bit like a tank buster, because if their enemy is frozen, he's basically just going to start destroying defenses by ignoring it. The A1 is going to ignore 25. The A2 is going to ignore 50%. So if you're up against a very tanky Doom Tower wave, you've got the control. You'll probably still want to bring another freeze champion like Ninja or Glazea, which is just in the summons. And then he gets this kind of like insane passive, which is for every freeze out there, he gains 10% more damage and he takes 10% less damage. So you can kind of build a glass cannon Yakal, because he's going to get a 50% damage reduction. He's going to get basically a double strength then if 5 enemies are frozen. And like, we'll probably do a For Science video on a weird thing of having like 10 spiderlings frozen and watches he just like.
Oh, that would be awesome. That would be so cool.
It could be so cool.
I wonder how he'll work alongside like Torment teams then.
It could be frustrating. I don't know whether he. So I originally, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is Candy, right? Like Candy, when anyone boosts a turn meter, he will give himself that veil, and when he's under a veil, he takes 40% less damage and deals 40% more.
Yep.
This is basically a Candy-like passive. It's not as good because obviously it's conditional on freeze, so you kind of like have to think, okay, well, I need the consistency of 4 freezes out, or having someone who can freeze it in a very good ratio. So we were in quite high heated discussions, I'd say, in some of our mod chats about, is he actually good? I think some of the plat players, I think, it's not going to really make a difference. I think he potentially could be good for anyone progressing in 3v3, trying to get that gold 1 mission for your romantic quests.
Yep.
He could be an option now because he does have some innate tankiness. And if you've got good freeze options, like a Shiramani, like a Ninja, if you want to use him in that way, or Glazea or Torment, then pairing him with a freeze champion could be pretty powerful. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff in his kit now. He's got ignore defense, turn meter steals, damage stimulus on his passive. So yeah, great change. And it is kind of like what you want to see when they buff a champion, right? You know, you take a champion that's kind of okay, doesn't really get much game time because he's kind of niche, and they rework his kit slightly, still maintain the identity of what the champion's meant to do. He's meant to be like a Blizzard Rider. But now you can almost say, well, look, I can play him in PvE. There's probably elements of PvP I can play him in. He's pretty good. So it's good to see that change.
And he sounds more like a Void Legendary.
Yeah, more to the level that we think Void Legendary should be, because obviously it's a very subjective opinion about how strong a Void Legendary needs to be, just based on the difficulty of access. So yeah, so you know, we've got that. We've got Cleopterix, which is going to be kind of like, I think, how much more damage is she going to do? Because the problem with Cleo is she's got 2 AoEs, which is great, but the damage just wasn't good enough. And then she just became
very difficult to keep alive as well.
Yeah, all spirit-based champions tend to have really bad base defense. People think like Ruel, spirit-based. I think there's another one I'm trying to think of. I can't remember who it is, but they tend to have pretty poor base defense and low base HP as well. So because she didn't hit hard enough on the AoEs, and she's quite selfish in terms of all her buffs for herself, you know, that she didn't really buff anyone. She basically became a Ruel or a Thea setup with her Hex.
Yeah.
And we know that the debuff in PvP is a bit awkward in terms of trying to, you know, sustain those debuffs because Resurgent and all these other stuff. So she kind of ended up in this situation. It's like she had one task and she does it okay, but that's about it. And unless you're running a Ruel for damage, you don't really, you know, there's not really much use. So if they've boosted her damage quite a lot, she was strong, she just wasn't godlike. It could be interesting because any double AoE, and she gives herself crit buff and crit damage buff now, so she's got a lot of almost like free stats.
Coming to a maximum damage video near you.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We'll run them. We'll run the numbers as we always do, but that is again a good change. She's targeting why it doesn't work. She doesn't do enough damage. We'll target that and we'll see what happens. Yeah, and I think also it's good to see a bit of love being given to some of the older champions like Scartosis. He was my first legendary when I got him 2 years ago, and he just like the duration on that on the A3 where it was like 7 turns, just way too high.
Yeah,
so 4
especially now, like later on in the game.
Yeah, he's just been like sort of power cracked.
Yeah,
you know, because it is a very powerful thing. You know, it fully cleanses, fully heals based on the number, or not fully heals, but heals based on the number of debuffs it takes away, and it gives you turn meters. It's a powerful ability. It just took too long. So, you know, I don't know if we'll start seeing him come back into a little bit of plat meta or in sort of high-end PvP, because his A1 is quite annoying because he'll steal buffs all the time. Yeah, you know, and he's a full team cleanse. So there's that. And he also does have a good A2 in terms of increased crit rate. So he was always considered to be, in my opinion, a good progression character, especially early to mid game where you needed I think he's got an aura for speed in all dungeons. And I think he's got that cleanse. He had the increased crit rate buff as well. So in terms of like in the mid game and early game where players are mostly, hey, I'm struggling to get stats here, he was really good. It's just his cooldowns so high. So it's good that they've done that.
I think it kind of falls into that category of champions which were very good back in the day, and then these days you have epics which are just kind of outweigh them. So they're just trying to buff these legendary champions back above the epics.
Exactly. I mean, there's a number of epic champions now. I can't think of off the top of my head. Something like I think Runekeeper does it. I think Scarthic does it, which basically do a full team cleanse on a 4-turn cooldown. So it's kind of like I've got a legendary champion here. It does exactly the same thing. Okay, does the heal and other bits, but ultimately he's not on the par of epics. So it's good that they go back and revisit some of these champions. I would, I don't know about you, but I'd love to see some of these older champions kind of get more of the newer debuffs. Expand the bomb champion pool with some of the other older champions that are just sitting around without an identity. Expand some of the
or just do something with bombs, please.
well, it's just, I mean,
we talked about that way too much in the past, but I just think it still needs something, and
it just needs more. That's the problem. We haven't, I did a breakdown when I did the bomb videos. It's really only 3 viable PvP bomb champions. And that is not enough to make it a thing you want to push, when you have so many decreased defense, so many decreased attack, weaken, strengthened champions now have gone up in terms of quantity. You've got multiple different options. Bomb champions, and even though there are 3, they all have different problems. Astralis single target, Shazar needs to crit, War Mother needs to detonate, because she doesn't instant detonate, so it could be fully cleansed. So it's kind of like they all have some form of problem. You don't have that, okay, if I have this champion and I put a bomb, everyone's dead, which is kind of what you want with bombs because of the sacrifice you have to make to include them. If you don't kill on the first turn,
I've said it probably 100 times in this podcast. Give bombs either splash damage or a stun.
Basically, make them bomber bombs.
Yeah,
with splash damage.
You
could even have like a tier 2, right? You could have cluster bombs.
Yeah.
So basically,
they blow up and then.
Yeah. So that's the splash damage. You could have like a tier 1 bomb, which basically is just a stun.
Yeah.
Or like 50% chance to stun. And then cluster bombs basically do splash damage and 100% chance to stun everyone. Gives you an option. You'd have to balance it, obviously.
Yeah.
Make it more interesting than, okay, I've got a bomb on you now. You either cleanse it or you die, which is kind of what it is in PvP.
Well, yeah. And
when you're facing things.
And I feel like it should feel and look like Trunda's AoE when it goes off.
If you're committing to it, because it's a commitment. It's basically like saying a speed team. If
we're going to put these on and we're going to live long enough for them to go off.
Or even let's have some defensive based bombs.
Give us that would be cool. Yeah.
HP based bombs. Maybe bombs, champions that interact with bombs by multiplying the damage based on HP pool differences or attack differences. Make it more interesting than attack times number, because that's just not dynamic enough for it to be a viable strategy. So I think
I was going to say we don't want to go on to another bomb ramp because there is so many cool things that have dropped in the game today, and I don't want to go off on a tangent talking about something which I think is probably the number 1 pet hate that the two of us share since we've started doing this podcast.
Make bombs great again.
Yeah, make bombs great, because they could be so good.
Not even again.
They could be so good, and they're just not. But
what is nice to see is so far in the last 3 patches, some champions have always been updated.
Yeah.
So one of the main complaints, especially Hellhades had before this, which was, they kind of like do a patch update and then 6 months later we get a few more champions. It feels like now there's always some problem champions that are getting looked at in each patch. So we're getting some changes. We had Bistophus and Thea last patch. There were some champions before that, the previous patch. So they're now starting to consistently update and fix champions. So it's
I like that it's being targeted at like almost forgotten champions as well. Because a lot of these champions, people, if they've been playing the game for a long time, they may have them locked away in their vault and they're like, actually, I've got that champion kicking around. He's getting a buff. Let's pull him out and see what he does.
It's champions like Lugan who've been around for so long that I've kind of they're too one-dimensional now for the current champions we get come out and, that we have released. Yeah. Because they've been power crept and they just need a little bit more love to, keep their identity, but give them a reason to be used. Because if you pull that champion, you're instantly like, okay, well, it's either a dupe for a Faction Guardian or he's going in the vault and, you might burn him for life tokens if you're crazy. But so that's obviously the first change. And then obviously we've got more information now, haven't we? So
we do. So, I mean, we've obviously got, so going back to the clan shop, because obviously your Carl's going to be accessible from there. We also have a new artifact set coming.
New artifact set. Now I wonder what they're going to do with this one, because they've said they've shuffled around the slots. My concern is that they're going to, I hope they don't do this, but I hope they don't alternate Revenge and Killstroke in that slot, because I think actually you can probably get rid of some of the slots that are there. Like, I'll be honest, I'm not trading Clan Gold for a 4-star glyph. It's just pointless. No.
So for those who haven't seen about the Killstroke artifact set as of yet, you can read about it on hellhades.com, obviously. So this is a new set, which is a 2-piece set, which gives you 20% crit damage and 5% speed bonus for every 2 sets.
It's basically like an upgraded crit damage set.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
much like we've got Immortal and you've got Fortitude sets, which upgrade the sort of starter basic sets, they call them in game. This is kind of like the same thing. So it's pretty good for someone like an off piece to a Savage set on a Seer. If you haven't got the Krill, if you don't need that ignore defense, it's nice. 5% speed is quite a lot for a 2-piece. It's not 12%, but when you consider the other pieces, like you're going to get 15% speed alongside 60% crit damage if you did triple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not earth shattering, but actually these little filler sets add a lot of value. It's like resilience. Not many people shout off the rooftops about how good resilience is, but often having 10% extra HP and defense is a nice little filler set you can have. And because it's in the Forge, for that set, you can get lots of them. Obviously, this is going to be in clan goal, but I tend to find now we've got Hydra, we've got CVC, we've got quests. You generally have quite a lot of clan gold if you're not buying the energy. I don't buy the energy because it's energy to me. The only thing I ever get is the revenge accessories to 5 to 6 star. So depending on which slot they go in, could be quite good. This
I think it's a very positive.
As long as the rarity is high. Let's not have 4-star rare, please. I don't want that. I don't want gold 5 clan arena rewards every week. Please no.
No, that would not be fun. No. But it's another thing, and again, this is coming off the back of the fact that we know that Plarium are going through a rough patch. With everything that's happening in Ukraine, and it's still going on. It's been 3 weeks since we recorded the podcast, and when we first recorded that podcast, it was only just kicking off. It hadn't even gone to the extent of what it did very, very quickly within days of us putting that podcast out. Obviously, our thoughts are still with the people in Plarium and the rest of Ukraine who are still sort of going through that. But we were under the impression that we were going to go probably a couple of months before we started seeing more stuff added to the game. And then, we started to hear about first the buffs to the champions that they were putting in. And then obviously they dropped, and we're going to change the clan shop and we're going to do these upgrades.
And what other things are we going to get now?
Well, and then
a huge patch.
And then we get news of another champion being added into the game.
A fragment collector as well, which is good because fragment collectors are generally less stressful on your resources.
Yeah. And it's going to be this month. Which again, we thought this month was going to be effectively free. Yes, they're starting it at the end of the month. So I think it's the 25th of March.
Yeah, it's basically a week tomorrow. Well, so Friday, 20, whatever. So tomorrow for us is the 18th, so a week. So probably a week today for viewers and listeners.
Yeah, and in true dwarf fashion, this champion looks amazing.
I will be honest, I'm a little bit concerned about what's being placed around the chest area.
I've just seen that. I
can't unsee it now. I've no idea why they're there, but they are there.
It's like Simon's intro the other day.
Oh God.
Lady H.
New one.
Yeah, Lady H mentioned that there was
certain phallic objects in a certain position.
Yes, a certain part of his intro was looking rather R-rated, to say the least.
Now we cannot unsee it.
Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So I mean, as ever, like with Plarium and these champions, the artwork looks amazing. This guy's clearly been prepped for a while. So I mean,
I think
he's been delayed coming out.
In Oracle's interview with Deadwood, they did say, to be fair, they could have done a fusion in February with it all going on, but they chose, based on the situation and the fact the players themselves have been asking for a little bit of a breather, to just push it back a month. So I think actually, this probably was due to be delivered last month potentially. So it's good that I actually think putting a break was actually a good idea for players, just to give them a bit of a breather, give them a bit of a chance to get masteries or review everything. Where's my next step? But this guy,
so it's not Nari the Lucky, isn't it?
Nari the Lucky. And I tell you what, if you are struggling for Doom Tower hard champions, he is a bit of a monster, in my opinion. because
So
of that A2.
yeah, do you want to talk through his skills and just give a rundown?
Yeah, so I think like when you look at this character, he's not a damage dealer unless his numbers are insane, which I doubt. He is a dwarf, and he's force affinity, so he's not void. So we're gonna have to make sure, obviously, anything he does have a double AoE, so potentially you could have him like in a stun set, would be viable because he's got a counter attack as well. So he's very much designed to be a control and stat reducing type of champion. He's got decreased resistance. He's only the second champion in the game up after the epic that was on the guaranteed summons. But this guy, you know, depending on what a book's eye, looks like he'll have a 100% chance of placing not only decreased resistance, but also decreased accuracy. On a 4-turn cooldown, probably goes to 3-turn with 2-turn duration. So that is insanely strong for Doom Tower, where often accuracy and resistance numbers are skyrocketing. Certain bosses you might need it. If you need a decreased accuracy boss champion and you didn't get to Tura for Bommel, it's a pretty decent option. He's going to keep it up consistently. But not only that, he's also got an AoE 100% chance probably to provoke. I'm saying probably, we don't know the books, we just know what he does, but generally... So
base 75%, isn't it? So chances are it will go up to 100%.
Hopefully that A3 will go down to a 4-turn cooldown. Otherwise, 6-turn cooldown for 1-turn provoke is really high.
Yeah.
But he does place a counterattack. And then we start to see some of the uniqueness in his kit. He will steal a buff on a 50% chance on his A1. That probably books up to like 75. So the idea is obviously he provokes, he attacks, he then starts stealing buffs. And then he also has a passive that at the start of every champion turn, or his champion turn, he will send one buff from the enemy onto a random ally. So you couldn't use him to basically manage a specific buff to a specific champion. But the fact that his accuracy increases then for each buff on any ally by 5, you get into this situation where, well, he doesn't need as much accuracy because he's getting this passive. If you have a very high buff team with like a triple buff for Lydia, you're going to get like 5 buffs on everyone. You're getting like 100 accuracy. He then decreases the enemy accuracy, which means the rest of your team, if you put it into a certain speed tune in your Doom Tower waves, they don't need as much accuracy.
And he's bringing down the resistance.
Yeah. So you basically ended up in a situation where you can actually build quite a strong provoke tanky team with a lot less stats than what you would have had to do before. Obviously, we'll have to play test and we can only look at his kit, but like certainly from just a simple, like, what would his main role be? He's going to be very strong at reducing the enemy's stats, essentially, and giving you more flexibility in your stats in your team to make them tankier, heal more, giving you more flexibility in different sets you can use. So yeah, I think he's actually quite good. And
he's fragment fusion, which we know full well, historically anyway, have been easier to obtain. You know, a lot of them, you just end up getting them by playing the game.
I would say, though, you still do have to actively try. Like, I noticed the last fragment, you know, if you miss an event, is a bit tight.
Yeah.
But you normally can skip 1 or 2 tournaments, or if you do both summons, you can skip a couple of the tournaments normally, because you only get 5 fragments. Where often with a traditional fusion, you can't really afford any downtime, because if you're not doing the event, you're probably doing like food farming or potion farming or something else to get up to the required time scales to get all your champions done. Where at least with the fragment, it's kind of like, right, can I do both summons? Yes or no? If I can probably skip like the Ice Golem tournament or an artifact enhancement or something of that nature. But you still have to try. I think if you miss any tournaments, you still end up in this position where you're thinking, "Ooh, am I going to be 5 fragments short?" Because you can't really rely on winning a tournament. But they are generally the easiest fusion of the lot.
Yeah. And you know, I think if anything, that was probably the best way to ease people back into it after having a little bit of a break from it. But you know, I think in general, dumping all of this in this week is crazy, because you know we weren't really expecting much this month. I don't think anybody was, and you know, for them to now be starting to roll stuff out, I think, and I can't criticize any of it. I don't think any of the stuff that they've dropped for us is a bad thing for the game. I think you know, this is hopefully going to up the player engagement. We've got obviously a 2 times Ancient this weekend with a 10 times Lysandra running at the same time.
Good luck to everyone on that.
It's just, I mean, we've gone from like radio silence, which is completely fair to them, and I think everyone kind of stepped back and was like, look, we're not going to hassle you about this at all, to, you know, within the space of a week and a half, them suddenly being like, right, we're going to start rolling stuff out, and then
this,
and you can have this and this and this
and a little bit more.
and I think I see a lot of people, especially over the past week or so, talking in the community saying, oh, is Raid in trouble? Are the numbers going down?
Which
and
is
things
understandable,
like that.
because engagement from Plarium, you know, there is kind of like a rod for their own back, where they've been doing so good at regular updates, champion drops, content releases, new features, you know, adjustments. It's kind of like people have got used to it. And I don't think everyone's fully aware of what's going on in Ukraine. Obviously, they don't know the history of the company like we would. So it's easy for them to come along and go, where's the patch? You know,
what's going on with Raid? Is Raid dead? And things like that. And I guess one thing that I will say to the community, at least, is that, you know, as our website and obviously Hellhades' YouTube and things like that, we're not seeing anything that's really worrying about the game at all. I know a few content creators have put out videos saying, you know, that numbers are massively dropping. And honestly, we're not seeing it. You know, we're still seeing an extremely high number of people using the optimizer. Our traffic on the website is still exceptionally high. So don't believe or buy into the hype. If you're somebody who's concerned about the longevity of the game and concerned about investing or you know, spending in the game and things like that because you think the game's going to disappear, Plarium will not let Raid Shadow Legends disappear.
It's too big. It's too big a game. And to be fair to Aristocrat, which is obviously the parent company of Plarium, they've already or had already started planning for what if scenarios. You know, there's talks that there is a new HQ going into Poland, in Krakow. They're building that up, which I'd imagine they'll try and relocate the staff if they want to, you know, out of Ukraine to that office and start rebuilding their infrastructure if they need to. They already had plans from, you know, if anyone's listened to the Oracle's interview, which I think is well worth to listen to, as is the two interviews that Cyrilla has done for Hellhades and with Ash. It kind of gives you the message that, you know, Plarium and Aristocrat were ready if something bad happened. They hoped in, and I think a lot of them didn't think it would come to it, but they had the contingency plans to go, hey, you know, here's remote equipment, here's your stuff, make sure the servers are in a secure location, make sure the game can continue, and then get our staff back into a position where they can start building, you know, new content, exciting content that they themselves want to build and get interested in. So I think as much as we can criticize their commercial gains and goals a little bit, we've got to give them credit there for looking out for their staff and also looking at kind of ensuring that those members of
and
staff
protecting the player base as well. And that's the other thing.
Well, it's protecting the staff, because with everything going on, obviously whether you've got your job or not is so low value compared to the situations that they're facing. But this war hopefully will end very soon, but it'll eventually end, and after that there needs to be a facility in place for the staff to actually have a job and be able to rebuild. And it's good that they've put the steps in place there to ensure that there is a future for those. So even if it looks dark for them right now and everything else is going on, when it ends, there's not like this, okay, now what? I've got nothing left. They've helped them at least to get into a position where there's a future there, that they can get back to work, they can get back to things that they love to do. You know, I think people forget that many of the community managers play this game as much as we do and love the game as much as we do. So for them, it's exciting when they get new content as much as it is for us, and they want to share it with everyone. They want to do the community contests and stuff like that. And they really love engaging with the community. So Raid is never going to die, certainly in the next year.
Never's a strong word.
Everything comes to an end in the end.
Yeah, I think we've always
such a long lifespan to it.
Probably 3 to 5 years before it really starts to drop off, and that's if Plarium don't intentionally do it, which is where a company
Clash of Clans has been on for how long now?
I mean,
WoW went for how long?
I mean, WoW's still going
still
strong.
going.
It's 16 years strong, and
So,
but Summoner's War is what 8 or 9 years old now.
Yeah.
Still got a really strong player base. So I
The
think
good
it's
thing with Raid
overhyped.
is there is always something different you can do. Yes, you will get to a point where you solve the game. If you have all the best champions and you've played super hard, and you'll always you'll get to it. It's like, oh yeah, well, my dungeons are 1 minute runs. That's fine, but there's always some fun stuff you can do if that's what you're into, the min-maxing, finding new ways to build champions, new team combinations. And obviously with Hydra, hopefully they'll improve that and make it a little bit less RNG and a little bit more fun. There's talks of a new battle pass at some point. There's talks of that void tower that we have been waiting for.
Probably drop tomorrow now that we've started getting this like influx of content coming in.
The roadmap is still there. More Doom Tower bosses is possible if they want to take that. Those present new challenges for players. So it was concerning that obviously the war was going on and everything. We didn't know what that would impact. But I think, now that we're seeing some stuff come out today and we're seeing all the news about the next patch, it feels like the next patch is going to be a monster patch. Which will probably be about a day when it comes out of me stressing, trying to analyze all the changes. But yeah, so it's good to see that we're seeing some updates so soon, to be honest, as you've mentioned. Like we all said, right, a couple of months, let's try and let's see what happens. But it's not even been a month and they're already getting more stuff out now. So that's great to see.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we'll probably wrap up the podcast for this week. We are back to recording the podcast every single week, as long as we're able to. Next week, we are going to try very hard to get Sham on from Incarnate to talk about the launch that they're doing, because for those of you that have followed the community and know about Incarnate, it's a new game. We've been working alongside them for over a year now as they develop their game, and it's actually going to be launching into beta next month, which will actually be the final beta, and there will be no resets after that goes live. So basically, the game will effectively be open.
Access.
And anything that you get in the game and things like that are going to keep into the future of the game. And it'd be cool to get Sham on. I think we actually had him on the podcast very early on when we first started to talk about the builds. But yeah, it'd be cool to see how far they've come in terms of their progression, because I know a load of stuff's happened inside their organization since we last had him on. And to talk about some of the stuff going on there. In terms of HH Gaming and this channel, we've got a load of content lined up. As I said, we have been exceptionally busy, so we haven't really been able to get a lot of it up and running yet. However, over the next few months that you're going to be able to see a load more stuff on this channel. So if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please make sure that you do. Follow us on social media. We also have a new newsletter on the website, which you can sign up to just to stay up to date with some of the posts and articles and things like that we're putting out, and all that good stuff. So plenty more to come from us and the team at HH Gaming. And yeah, I guess until the next podcast, we will see you in another video very, very soon.
Good luck with your summons.